Some theaters got Sicario earlier than others, and unfortunately for me, it didn't come out until October 2nd, which was last Friday. So I had to wait 3 weeks before Sicario finally came out to my theaters. And it was definitely worth the wait. Sicario is among my top 5 films of 2015. Sicario is a dark and gritty and a slow-paced, very suspenseful thriller, which is similar to Zero Dark 30, but instead of trying to find Osama bin Laden, it's more along the lines of the war against the cartels. Emily Blunt plays this very promising FBI agent who at the beginning of the film is running this operation that is supposedly saving a possible kidnapping, only to discover a house of horrors, pretty much. She's then given the opportunity to work with a team directly going after the people responsible for that house of horrors. Not hesitating, she joins up with Josh Brolin's team, but she soon discovers that this team has some really shady and very different tactics to try and take down the cartel. Also throw in this very mysterious man played by Benicio del Toro, who seems to be working with the FBI and seems to be working with Josh Brolin's team. And he's quite the enigma. He's a mysterious guy. They don't know who he's really working for, what his, and you start to wonder if he could possibly turn on them. Yeah, pretty much Sicario is a mixture of Zero Dark 30 meets Traffic meets a little bit of Black Mass. And so if you like all 3 of these films, which I like all 3 of these films, then you're most likely going to think Sicario is a pretty epic and great film. Now let me get this out of the way first. It is not the action-packed thriller you might believe it is from seeing the trailer. Similar to Zero Dark 30 and Traffic and even Black Mass, it's a slow-paced thriller that builds and builds, and this is a more suspenseful film rather than tense action and just mind-blowing stunts. But even with that said, there are some great action sequences in this movie. They're quick, they're tactical, they're straight to the point, but it's done in a really smart and very grounded way. Yeah, the acting is great from everyone in this film, and it's what I've come to expect with films like this. Josh Brolin is this strange, laid-back guy that wears flip-flops, but even though he's a FBI or working for the FBI, who can really turn on a dime and use people and really get angry. He's the kind of guy that has one way of doing things, and if you don't do that way, then screw you. Emily Blunt has easily the second best performance in this movie, and she's the straight and narrow sort of FBI agent. She wants to do it by the books. So she becomes this fish out of water, and she's trying to cope with all the darker and all the shady tactics that this team uses. She becomes the conflicted hero whose eyes we see through the most. But while she is the main character through pretty much most of the movie, Benicio del Toro is easily the best performance in Sicario. He has a pretty nice range in this movie. Yes, he's your mysterious guy that doesn't talk that much, and he's more of an enigma than anything. But there is something about him that can be a little sympathetic as well as being a complete cold-hearted badass. And as his backstory slowly unwinds, you realize that he used to be possibly a good person until something happened that changed his life and turned him into this sort of monster that he can be in the battlefield. I really did love his character arc, and he is the most interesting thing in this movie. Now, I've been really liking this director's work so far. He's made Prisoners, which is my second favorite, and it would have been my favorite movie of 2013 if it hadn't been for 12 Years a Slave. And then Enemy, which is really interesting, very original. It's an art house film, but it's something that I can really get into. It's smart. You have to think for yourself in order to understand everything that's going on. But I love that it doesn't hold your hand, and it's all the more better for it. I think Sicario is somewhere in the middle of his other 2 films. Sicario is a little bit more mainstream, but not as mainstream as Prisoners. It also has that little mystery element that Prisoners does with Benicio del Toro being the mystery. But it also doesn't hold your hand, similar to how Enemy treats you like a intelligent person and lets you figure things out and piece things together. And like I said, similar to Enemy, it's maybe a little slower paced than Prisoners. This might upset some people, but for me, that didn't bother me in the slightest. The film is also beautifully shot. Now, there are some sudden and pretty jarring character switches throughout the movie. For the most part, you're definitely deeply engraved in Emily Blunt's perspective, because even during the action scenes, you stick with her, and so some of the action scenes might not be as action-packed as you'd like them to be, because sometimes she's held back and she's more of an observer during some of these action sequences. I can really appreciate an action scene when our main character is in the background, but it still feels intense and suspenseful. And so when it suddenly jumps into the perspective of this random Mexican in the film that we have no idea who he is or what he's about, and we get a little bit of his family life and we don't really know who he is in the entire movie, it is a little jarring. But I trusted that this random Mexican was going to somehow play out in the later half of the movie. And of course he did. It eventually connected, and that's what I was hoping for, because if it wasn't, then it's like, why is this in the movie? It also better trained me that, okay, there's going to be some interesting jumps with character perspective in this film. And so when the climax happens and we jump into Benicio del Toro's main perspective, because Emily Blunt gets left behind during the major climax of the film, I was better prepared for it because there was this random jumps beforehand of this totally random or seemingly random character in the movie. And I have to tell you, the climax of the film is one of my favorite scenes by far in 2015. It's all through Benicio del Toro's perspective. You get a little bit of it in the trailer when he looks like he's in a possible penthouse or a mansion because he's aiming his silenced pistol. Yeah, that scene in the trailer, that's part of the climax of the film that is ultimate and epic. It's not over the top and unrealistic. It's still grounded, but there's such precision to some of these headshots and this crazy shooting that it's amazing. If it wasn't for Mad Max Fury Road, the ending of Sicario would be my ultimate favorite action scene of 2015. I'm dead serious. Mad Max Fury Road has some competition with this one action scene alone. I really enjoyed Sicario. It's one of my favorite films of 2015. And even though I can point out some flaws and some things that people might not like in the film, there are things that didn't really bother me and things that I forgive, to the point where I have absolutely no problem with anything in Sicario. When that happens, well, Sicario gets 5 stars. So have you seen Sicario? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. And if you haven't seen Sicario, what is your favorite crime drama that's really suspenseful? As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.